If you want to score a perfect 30 out of 30 on the TOEFL listening section, keep watching. In this video, we'll go through 3 full listening practice tests designed to boost your skills and help you get familiar with the types of questions you'll see on the test. You can pause the video after each question to try answering on your own first. Then follow along as I break it down. Whether you're just starting out or you've been struggling to achieve your target score, this Study With Me session will give you the practice and confidence you need for test day. Let's get started.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a librarian.
Hi, I'm new here. I couldn't come to the student orientation, and I'm wondering if you can give me a few quick pointers about the library. I'd really appreciate it.
Sure, I'd be glad to. What's your major area of study?
Latin American literature.
Okay. Well, over here's the section where we have language, literature, and the arts. And if you go downstairs, you'll find the history section. Generally, the students who concentrate in Latin American literature find themselves researching in the history section a lot.
You're right. I'm a transfer student. I've already done a year at another university, so I know how the research can go. I spent a lot of time in the history section. So how long can I borrow books for?
Our loan period is a month. Oh, I should also mention that we have an interlibrary loan service. If you need to get hold of a book that's not in our library, there's a truck that runs between our library and a few other public and university libraries in this area. It comes around 3 times a week.
Hey, that's great. At my last school, it could take a really long time to get the materials I needed. So when I had a project, I had to make a plan way in advance. This sounds much faster. Another thing I was wondering is there a place where I can bring my computer and hook it up?
Sure. There's a whole area here on the main floor where you can bring a laptop and plug it in for power. But on top of that, we also have a connection for the internet at every seat.
Nice. So I can do all the research I need to do right here in the library. I'll have all the resources, all the books and information I need right here in one place.
Yep, that's the idea. I'm sure you'll need photocopiers too. They're down the hallway to your left. We have a system where you have to use a copy card, so you'll need to buy a card from the front desk. You insert it into the machine and you're ready to make copies.
How much do you guys charge?
7 cents a copy.
Oh, that's not too bad. Thanks. Where's the collection of rare books?
Rare books are up on the 2nd floor. They're in a separate room where the temperature's controlled to preserve the old paper in them. You need to get special permission to access them, and then you have to wear gloves to handle them because the oils in our hands, can destroy the paper, and gloves prevent that, so we have a basket of gloves in the room.
Okay, thanks. I suppose that's all I need to know. You've been very helpful. Thanks.
Anytime. Bye.
Bye.
Time to answer the questions. 1. Why does the student come to the library? To learn about the library's resources. At the beginning of the conversation, he mentioned that he couldn't come to the orientation, so he wanted to learn a few things about the library. 2. Why does the librarian point out the history section to the student? She assumes that he'll need to do research there. She said that students with art majors usually focus on this section. For the record, a major is the main thing you study in college. Your major can be biology, art, physics, and so on. For conversations, you should know campus vocabulary. Once you study it, understanding the information will become a piece of cake for you. If you want to learn the templates that make up almost half of your answers and allow you to score high on the speaking and writing, click on this link. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to get more tips and tricks about the test. And click the bell icon to be notified when the next video comes out. 3. What does the student imply about the interlibrary loan service at his last school? It was inconvenient. 4. What does the student need to do before he can use any rare books? He needs to obtain permission and put on gloves. As you can see, the questions are pretty detailed. So if you don't take notes and only rely on your memory, you might skip some important information and make mistakes. When you practice, make sure you always check if if your notes help you figure out the right answer or not. If they don't, listen to the recording once again and adjust them. Question 5.
Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
I'll have all the resources, all the books and information I need right here in one place.
Yep, that's the idea.
Which sentence best expresses what the librarian means when she says this?
Yep, that's the idea.
If she says, yes, that's the idea, it means that is what we intended. These kinds of questions usually test your idiomatic vocabulary. As you practice more, you'll notice that many of these questions use some idiomatic expressions and then want you to figure out what they mean. So the second type of vocabulary to brush up on is idiomatic vocabulary. Congrats! We've finished the first task. Let's move on to the lecture. For lectures, organize information in blocks. Create lists and make spaces between these blocks to help you understand your notes better. It also helps you to get a deeper understanding of the lectures as you go. This lecture is about the theater.
Listen to part of a lecture in a class on theater history. The professor is discussing the theater of 19th century France.
The 19th century was the time that saw what we call realism develop in the European theater. To understand this, though, we first need to look at an earlier form of drama known as the well-made play, which basically was a pattern for constructing plays. Plays that, beginning with some early 19th century comedies in France, proved very successful commercially. The dramatic devices used here weren't actually anything new. They'd been around for centuries. But the formula for a well-made play required that certain of these elements be included in a particular order, and most importantly, that everything in the play be logically connected. In fact, some of these playwrights would start by writing the end of a play and work backward toward the beginning, just to make sure each event led logically from what had gone before. Okay, so what are the necessary elements of a well-made play? Well, the first is logical exposition. Exposition is whatever background information you have to reveal to the audience so they'll understand what's going on. Before this time, exposition might have come from actors simply giving speeches. Someone might walk out on a stage and say, "In fair Verona, where we lay our scene," and then tell all about the feuding families of Romeo and Juliet. But for the well-made play, even the exposition had to be logical, believable. So, for example, you might have two servants gossiping as they're cleaning the house, and one says, "Oh, what a shame the master's son is still not married." And the other might mention a rumor about a mysterious gentleman who's just moved into town with his beautiful daughter. These comments are part of the play's logical exposition. The next key element of a well-made play is referred to as the inciting incident. After we have the background information, we need a key moment that gets things moving, that really makes the audience interested in what happens to the characters we just heard about. So, for example, after the two servants reveal all this background information, we meet the young man, just as he first lays eyes on the beautiful young woman and immediately falls in love. This is the inciting incident. It sets off the plot of the play. Now, the plot of a well-made play is usually driven by secrets, things that the audience knows, but the characters often don't know. So, for example, the audience learns through a letter or through someone else's conversation who this mysterious gentleman is and why he left the town many years before. But the young man doesn't know about this. And the woman doesn't understand the ancient connection between her family and his. And before the secrets are revealed to the main characters, the plot of the play proceeds as a series of sort of up and down moments. For example, the woman first appears not to even notice the young man, and it seems to him like the end of the world. But then he learns that she actually wants to meet him too. So life is wonderful. Then if he tries to talk with her, maybe her father gets furious for no apparent reason, so they can't see each other. But just as the young man has almost lost all hope, he finds out, well, you get the idea. The reversals of fortune continue, increasing the audience's tension and excitement, making them wonder if everything's going to come out okay or not. Next comes an element known as the obligatory scene. It's a scene, a moment, in which all the secrets are revealed, and generally things turn out well for the hero and others we care about. A happy ending of some sort. This became so popular that a playwright almost had to include it in every play, which is why it's called the obligatory scene. And that's followed by the final dramatic element, the denouement, or the resolution, when all the loose ends have to be tied up in a logical way. Remember, the obligatory scene gives the audience emotional pleasure, but the denouement offers the audience a logical conclusion. That's the subtle distinction we need to try very hard to keep in mind. So, as I said, the well-made play, this form of playwriting, became the basis for realism in drama and for a lot of very popular 19th century plays. And also a pattern we find in the plots of many later plays and even movies that we see today.
Time to answer the questions. Number 1, what is the lecture mainly about? This is the question you'll get asked after every lecture. The right answer is usually something that was discussed the most. In this case, successful standard formula for writing plays. Note that it's not a famous example of a well-made play. They're talking about plays in general. 2. According to the professor, why did some playwrights write the end of a play before the beginning? To ensure that the plot would develop in a logical manner. If you didn't catch this in the recording, feel free to use logic. Why would you write the end of a play before the beginning? Probably so that you already know how things will turn out at the end and can organize the events in the play logically. Also, feel free to always start by eliminating the 2 options that are definitely incorrect. Then you can choose between the remaining 2. 3. Why does the professor mention a conversation between 2 servants? To show how background information might be revealed in a well-made play. 4. According to the professor, what dramatic elements are typically included in a well-made play to help move the plot forward? A series of major changes in the hero's apparent chances of success, and information known to the audience but not to the main characters. Again, always check your notes for such details. The professor said that the plot is usually driven by secrets, and there is a series of ups and downs. In the lecture, he made an example of when the woman in the play doesn't notice the man at first, and then he learns that she wants to meet him, and then he tries to talk to her, but her father gets furious all of a sudden. These are ups and downs in the play. 5. What does the professor imply about the obligatory scene and the denouement? The difference between them might be unclear to some people. 6.
Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question.
This is the inciting incident. It sets off the plot of the play.
Why does the professor say this?
It sets off the plot of the play.
This is the inciting incident. It sets off the plot of the play. Of course, that's the definition of the term. So the right answer is to help students understand the meaning of a new term. Good. One more task done. Time for another conversation.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a business professor.
So, Richard, what's up?
Well, I know we have a test coming up on chapters,
Chapters 3 and 4 from your textbook.
right, 3 and 4. Well, I didn't get something you said in class Monday.
All right. Do you remember what it was about?
Yeah, you were talking about a gym, a health club where people can go to exercise, that kind of thing.
Okay. But the health club model is actually from chapter 5. So,
Oh, chapter 5. Oh, so it's not... Okay, but I guess I still want to try to understand.
oh, of course. Well, I was talking about an issue in strategic marketing. The health club model. With a health club, you might think they would have trouble attracting customers, right?
Well, I know when I pass by a health club and I see all those people working out, the exercising, I just as soon walk on by.
Yeah, there's that. Plus, lots of people have exercise equipment at home, or they can play sports with their friends, right?
Sure.
But nowadays, in spite of all that, and expensive membership fees, health clubs are hugely popular. So how come?
I guess that's what I didn't understand.
Okay. Basically, they have to offer things that most people can't find anywhere else. You know, quality. That means better exercise equipment, high-end stuff. And classes, exercise classes, maybe aerobics.
I'm not sure if I... Okay, I get it. Yeah. And you know, another thing is, I think people probably feel good about themselves when they're at the gym. And they can meet new people, socialize.
Right. So health clubs offer high-quality facilities, and also they sell an image about people having more fun, relating better to others, and improving their own lives if they become members.
Sure, that makes sense.
Well then, can you think of another business or organization that could benefit from doing this? Think about an important building on campus here. Something everyone uses, a major source of information.
You mean like an administrative building?
Well, that's not what I had in mind.
Oh, you mean the library?
Exactly. Libraries. Imagine public libraries. They're an information resource for the whole community, right?
Well, they can be. But now with the internet and big bookstores, you can probably get what you need without going to a library.
Well, that's true. So, if you were the director of a public library, what would you do about that?
To get more people to stop in? Well, like you said, better equipment, maybe a super fast internet connection, and not just a good variety of books, but also like nice, comfortable areas where people can read and do research, things that make them want to come to the library and stay.
Great.
Oh, and maybe have authors come and do some readings, or, I don't know, special presentations, something people couldn't get at home.
Now you're getting it.
Thanks, Professor Wilkins. I think so too.
What is the conversation mainly about? A strategy for attracting customers. While the student first came to clarify some points for the upcoming test, the whole conversation was about ways to attract customers for different businesses. 2. What does the professor imply about the upcoming test? It will not contain questions about the health club model, because this information is from chapter 5, which is not part of the test. 3. Based on the conversation, indicate whether each of the following is offered by health clubs. You see, this is what I was talking about when I said that the questions in this section are very detailed. And this is where a list of your notes would have come in handy. Low membership fees? No, they have high fees instead. High quality facilities? Yes. Exercise classes? Yes. Positive self-image? Yes. Special presentations? No. Presentations were mentioned when they talked about libraries. 4. What does the professor imply about public libraries? They need to give greater emphasis to strategic marketing. This is because they are not very popular today and have to work even harder to attract customers. 5.
Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
With a health club, you might think they would have trouble attracting customers, right?
Well, I know when I pass by a health club and I see all those people working out, exercising, I just as soon walk on by.
Why does the student say this?
Well, I know when I pass by a health club and I see all those people working out, exercising, I just as soon walk on by.
To give an example that supports the professor's point. Next lecture. This one is about geology, so stay focused. It might contain some more challenging vocabulary.
Listen to part of a lecture in a geology class.
Last time we started to talk about glaciers and how these masses of ice form from crystallized snow. And some of you were amazed at how huge some of these glaciers are. Now, even though it may be difficult to understand how a huge mass of ice can move, or flow is another word for it, it's really no secret that glaciers flow because of gravity. But how they flow, the way they flow, needs some explaining. Now, the first type of glacier flow is called basal slip. Basal slip, or sliding as it's often called, basically refers to the slipping or sliding of a glacier across bedrock, actually across a thin layer of water on top of the bedrock. So this process shouldn't be too hard to imagine. What happens is that the ice at the base of a glacier is under a great deal of pressure, the pressure coming from the weight of the overlying ice. And you probably know that under pressure, the melting temperature of water, of the ice, is reduced. So ice at the base of the glacier melts, even though it's below 0 degrees Celsius. And this results in a thin layer of water between the glacier and the ground. This layer of water reduces friction. It's like a lubricant, and it allows the glacier to slide or slip over the bedrock. Okay? Now, the next type of movement we'll talk about is called deformation. You already know that ice is brittle. If you hit it with a hammer, it'll shatter like glass. But ice is also plastic. It can change shape without breaking. If you leave, for example, a bar of ice supported only at one end, the unsupported end, will deform under its own weight. It'll kind of flatten out at one end, get distorted, deformed. Think of deformation as a very slow oozing. Depending on the stresses on the glacier, the ice crystals within it reorganize. And during this reorganization, the ice crystals realign in a way that allows them to slide past each other. And so the glacier oozes downhill without any ice actually melting. Now, there are a couple of factors that affect the amount of deformation that takes place, or the speed of the glacier's movement. For example, deformation is more likely to occur the thicker the ice is because of the gravity of the weight of the ice. And temperature also plays a part here, in that cold ice does not move as easily as ice that is closer to the melting point. In fact, it's not too different from the way oil is, thicker at lower temperatures. So if you have a glacier in a slightly warmer region, it will flow faster than a glacier in a cooler region. Okay, now I'd like to touch briefly on extension and compression. Your textbook includes these as types, as a particular type of glacier movement, but you'll see that there are as many textbooks that omit it as a type of movement as include it. And I might not include it right now if it weren't in your textbook. But basically, the upper parts of glaciers have less pressure on them, so they don't deform as easily. They tend to be more brittle. And crevasses can form in these upper layers of the glacier when the glacier comes into contact with bedrock walls, or is otherwise under some kind of stress but can't deform quickly enough. So the ice will expand or constrict, and that can cause big fissures, big cracks to form in the surface layers of the ice. And that brittle surface ice moving is sometimes considered a type of glacial movement, depending on which source you're consulting. Now, as you probably know, glaciers generally move really slowly, but sometimes they experience surges. And during these surges, in some places, they can move at speeds as high as 7,000 meters per year. Now, speeds like that are pretty unusual, hundreds of times faster than the regular movement of glaciers, but you can actually see glaciers move during these surges, though it is rare.
Time to look at the questions. 1. What is the lecture mainly about? Explanations of how glaciers move. 2. The professor discusses the process of basal slip. Put the steps in the correct order. Again, a test of your note-taking skills. For processes, I usually write down lines with information connected by arrows. This helps write down things faster. Here, pressure is increased on the ice is number 1. A liquid layer forms at the base of the glacier is 2. Then, friction between the glacier and bedrock is reduced and the glacier begins to slide. Again, if you got it wrong, you need to adjust your notes. 3. What factors are involved in the amount of deformation a glacier undergoes? Thickness of glacial ice, the temperature of the glacial ice. 4. What does the professor say about the speed of glaciers? It can be fast enough for movement to be noticeable. 5.
What does the professor explain when he says this?
But ice is also plastic. It can change shape without breaking. If you leave, for example, a bar of ice supported only at one end, the unsupported end, will deform under its own weight.
A characteristic of ice that is related to glacial movement. 6. What does the professor imply about compression and extension? He's not convinced that it's a type of glacial movement. Finally, the last lecture is in the art class. There is an interesting observation I've made. Very often, lectures on humanities subjects have easier vocabulary, but contain a lot of details and have more complex questions. Lectures on sciences feature more challenging lexes instead, but have simpler questions. Have you noticed something like that when you practice? Let me know.
Listen to part of a lecture in an art history class.
We've been talking about the art world of the late 19th century in Paris, and today I'd like to look at the women who went to Paris at that time to become artists. Now, from your reading, what do you know about Paris, about the art world of Paris during the late 19th century?
People came from all over the world to study.
It had a lot of art schools and artists who taught painting. Our book mentions classes for women artists. And it was a good place to go to study art.
If you wanted to become an artist, Paris was not a good place to go. Paris was the place to go. And women could find skilled instructors there. Before the late 19th century, women who wanted to become artists had to take private lessons or learn from family members. They had more limited options than men did. But around 1870, some artists in Paris began to offer classes for female students. These classes were for women only. And by the end of the 19th century, it became much more common for women and men to study together in the same classes. So within a few decades, things had changed significantly. Okay, let's back up again and talk about the time period from the 1860s to the 1880s and talk more about what happened in women's art classes. In 1868, a private art academy opened in Paris, and for decades it was probably the most famous private art school in the world. Its founder, Rodolphe Julien, was a canny businessman and quickly established his school as a premier destination for women artists. What he did was, after an initial trial period of mixed classes, he changed the school policy. He completely separated the men and women students.
Any reason why he did that?
Well, like I said, Julian was a brilliant businessman with progressive ideas. He saw that another small private art school, where all the students were women, was very popular at that time, and that's probably why he adopted the women-only classes. These classes were typically offered by established artists and were held in the studio, the place where they painted. This was a big deal because finally women could study art in a formal setting. And there was another benefit to the group setting of these classes. The classes included weekly criticism, and the teacher would rank the art of all the students in the class, from best to worst. How would you like it if I did that in this class?
No way.
But our textbook said that the competition was good for women. It helped them see where they needed to improve.
Isn't that interesting? One woman artist, her name was Marie Bashkirtsev. Bashkirtsev once wrote how she felt about a classmate's work. She thought her classmate's art was much better than her own, and it gave her an incentive to do better. Overall, the competition in the women's art classes gave women more confidence that they could also compete in the art world after their schooling. And even though Bashkirtsev couldn't study in the same classes as men, she was having an impact as an artist. Just look at the Salon. What do you know about the Salon?
It was a big exhibition, a big art show that they had in Paris every year. The art had to be accepted by judges.
It was a big deal. You could make a name for yourself.
You could have a painting or sculpture in the Salon and go back to your home country saying you'd been a success in Paris. It was sort of a seal of approval. It was a great encouragement for an artist's career. And by the last 2 decades of the 19th century, 1/5 of the paintings in the Salon were by women, much higher than in the past. In fact, Marie Bashkirtsev herself had a painting in the Salon in 1881. Interestingly, this masterpiece, called In the Studio, is a painting of the interior of Julian's art school. It's not in your textbook. I'll show you the painting next week. The painting depicts an active, crowded studio with women drawing and painting a live model. It was Bashkirtsev actually followed Julian's savvy suggestion and painted her fellow students in a class at the school with the artist herself at the far right. A great advertisement for the school when the painting eventually hung at the Salon, for a women's studio had never been painted before.
1. What is the lecture mainly about? How opportunities for women artists in Paris improved. This one is easy. They talked about opportunities for women artists a lot. 2. What point does the professor make about Julian when he mentions that Julian's art school offered some classes only for women? Julian possessed outstanding business skills. The lecturer called him a canny and brilliant businessman, so he has outstanding business skills. 3. What does the professor emphasize as one benefit of competition in women's classes? Women gained more confidence in their artistic abilities. 4. According to the professor, what were 2 ways that the situation of women artists had changed by the end of the 19th century in Paris? Women and men took art classes together. Women artists played a greater role in the Salon exhibitions. 5. What does the professor imply about Bashkirtsev's painting in the studio? It was beneficial for both Bashkirtsev and the school where she studied. The professor mentioned that it was the first time when such a thing was done, which obviously made the school more popular. 6.
Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
It had a lot of art schools and artists who taught painting. Our book mentions classes for women artists. And It was a good place to go to study art.
If you wanted to become an artist, Paris was not a good place to go. Paris was the place to go.
What does the professor mean when he says this?
If you wanted to become an artist, Paris was not a good place to go. Paris was the place to go.
If the professor says Paris was the place to go, he means that Paris was the most important place for an artist to study and work.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a university employee at the campus employment office.
Hi, can I help you?
I hope so. My name's Mark Whitman.
Don't I remember you from last year? You worked in, where was it? The art library?
Yeah, well, you're good. That was me, and I really enjoyed the work.
Right, yeah, your supervisor gave us some really great feedback at the end of the year. Oh, he's so organized, always on time, helpful.
Really? Well, I'm glad. It was a good job.
Well, we usually try to match students' jobs with their academic interests.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what career I'm headed for, but librarian is a possibility. It was a great experience to learn how it works and meet some people working in the field. But for this year, well, that's what I wanted to ask about.
Oh, how come you waited so long to come in? You know how fast campus jobs fill up. If you'd come in earlier, you could probably have gotten the library job again. I mean, since you have the experience from last year, you don't need the training and all. But it's been filled now.
Yeah, I know. But I'd planned to get a job working at a restaurant off campus this year. I really need to make more money than I did last year, and working as a waiter, there's always the tips. But I've tried a ton of places, and I haven't found anything. I know it's really late, but, well, I was wondering if maybe there was some job that hadn't been taken, or maybe someone started a job and, had to drop it or something.
Well, I doubt you'll find anything.
Could you possibly check? I know it's a long shot, but my friend Suzanne, she takes photography classes in Harrison Hall, and she sort of thought there might be an opening in the janitorial staff.
Why does your friend, the photography student, think she has information about a janitorial staff opening? I'm pretty sure those jobs are filled. In fact, I remember taking lots of applications for them. But let me double-check it online.
She said the whole studio arts building, and especially the photo lab, have been kind of, sort of messy lately. I mean, she says there's, chemicals and stuff left out, and, it's like no one's been cleaning up. Oh, but that could just be, students using the lab after hours or something, like after it's been cleaned.
Hang on. There is, an asterisk next to one of the job numbers here. There's a note. Let's see. Your friend's right. Seems like one of the student janitors quit a couple of weeks ago for some reason. Well, whatever. It looks like this is your lucky day.
Wow, that is so great. So, who's the contact person?
Check with the janitorial office.
Fine. Thanks so much.
Why does the student go to the employment office?
The correct answer is C. The student goes to the employment office to find out about getting an on-campus job. He already got great feedback from his supervisor at the end of the year, so he doesn't need any more feedback.
Why does the university employee seem surprised at the student's request for on-campus jobs?
The correct answer is B. The woman is surprised at the student's request because she expected him to apply earlier in the semester. She says jobs on campus fill up very quickly, and the library job that a student had last year has already been filled.
What does the student imply about the job he had at the library last year?
The correct answer is B. It did not pay as well as jobs in restaurants. The student said he needed to make more money this year. And since waiters get tips, he wanted to get a job off campus in a restaurant. This means that his previous job at the library didn't pay very well.
Why does the student mention his friend Suzanne?
D is correct, to explain why he thinks there is a job opening. The student mentions that his friend, Suzanne, takes photography classes in Harrison Hall, and she told him that there might be an opening in the janitorial staff.
What can be inferred about the woman when she says this?
Why does your friend, the photography student, think she has information about a janitorial staff opening?
The correct answer is C. She doubts the accuracy of the information. The woman is skeptical that a photography student would know about a janitorial staff opening. Well, that wraps up part 1. Here is some useful vocabulary we came across in this conversation. Janitor. A janitor is a person employed to take care of a large building, such as a school or college. He or she deals with the cleaning, repairs, and so on. Janitorial. Janitorial means relating to the job of being a janitor. In the conversation, the woman said janitorial staff, which is a more formal way of saying janitors, to fill up. To fill up means to become full. Campus jobs fill up very fast. A long shot. A long shot is something you try, even though it's unlikely to be successful. I know it's a long shot, but my friend Suzanne thought there might be an opening in the janitorial staff. Let's move on to the next part where you'll listen to a lecture.
Listen to part of a lecture in an earth science class. The class has been discussing volcanoes.
Okay, we know the Earth's surface, the crust, is made up of tectonic plates and that these huge slabs of rocky crust are slowly sliding over or under or past each other. And we said that most of the world's volcanoes occur at the boundaries of these tectonic plates, where you have hot molten rock squeezing up through gaps between the plates. But some volcanoes occur not at the edges, but in the middle of a continental or oceanic plate. The Hawaiian Islands, for example, are thousands of kilometers away from any plate boundary, and yet you have vast amounts of magma, molten rock or lava, flowing up through the Earth's crust, which means, of course, that volcanic activity there can't be explained simply by plate tectonics. So, how do we explain these volcanic anomalies, these exceptions to the general rule? Well, back in 1963, a geophysicist by the name of Wilson came up with a hot spot theory to explain how this particular type of volcanic activity can occur, and can go on for maybe tens or even hundreds of millions of years. Wilson's theory was that hotspots exist below tectonic plates, and they're the cause of these volcanoes. But what causes the hotspots? Well, the most popular theory that's been proposed is the plume hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, plumes, basically columns of extremely hot magma. These plumes well up from deep inside the planet's interior, maybe even as deep as its core, and rise all the way up to melt through the Earth's crust. Imagine a burning candle, and imagine moving a sheet of heavy paper slowly over the flame of the candle. You're going to get a series of burn spots in the paper. Well, that's just like what's happening with the Hawaiian Islands, but instead of a sheet of paper, you've got a tectonic plate, and it's moving over this plume of intensely hot magma, and rather than a series of burn spots in the paper, you're getting a chain of volcanic islands where the hot plume melts through the crust under the Pacific Ocean at one point after another, with active volcanoes on the younger islands that are now just above the plume. And the other islands, well, the farther away from the plume they are now, the older they are, and the longer ago their volcanoes went dormant or extinct. Incidentally, volcanic islands may seem small, but the island known as the Big Island of Hawaii is one of the tallest topographic features on the planet, more than 5 kilometers from the seafloor to the ocean surface, and almost that much again, up to its highest peak. That's nearly 10 kilometers from ocean floor to the highest point on the island, which makes it taller even than Mount Everest. So, you can imagine the huge amounts of magma or lava that have flowed up to form even just this one island, much less the whole chain of islands. Now, the plume hypothesis provides a pretty elegant explanation for a volcanic anomaly like the Hawaiian Islands. But, while it's hypothetically attractive, there's very little direct evidence to support the theory because, so far, no one's been able to actually observe what's happening that far beneath the Earth's crust. Some studies have been done, seismographic, geochemical, where the data's consistent with the model, but they aren't definitive proof. Even the model supporters aren't comfortable claiming that it explains every volcanic anomaly. And, like any popular theory, I suppose, it has some determined critics. These critics have put forth a number of alternative theories, all unproven so far. But one well-regarded theory is the crack hypothesis, which assumes that hot spots are created when a piece of the crust gets stretched thinner and thinner, and the resulting stress causes small cracks to open up at weak spots in the crust. And it's through these cracks that magma pushes up to form volcanoes. Proponents of the crack hypothesis consider this a widespread phenomenon and believe that magma's not coming up from deep within the Earth's interior, but rather from just beneath the surface crust. This hypothesis is attractive because it fits with what we already know about plate tectonics, and it fits what we know about some secondary smaller hotspots, but how well does it explain the Hawaiian Islands? Could a series of random cracks produce that same particular string of islands, that sequence so neatly from old to young? You know, it worries me when a theory depends on coincidence to produce results.
What is the lecture mainly about?
The correct answer is C. Explanations for why volcanoes occur in some locations. At the beginning of the lecture, the professor says that we know what tectonic plates are, and that most volcanoes occur at the boundaries of the tectonic plates. but some volcanoes do not. They occur in the middle of the tectonic plates. Then the professor asks, so how do we explain these volcanic anomalies, these exceptions to the general rule? This tells us that the lecture will be about the reasons why volcanoes occur in the middle of the tectonic plates.
According to the professor, why was the hotspot theory originally proposed?
A is correct. To explain prolonged volcanic activity far from plate boundaries, the professor says that in 1963, a geophysicist, Wilson, came up with a hotspot theory to explain how this particular type of volcanic activity can occur. By this particular type of volcanic activity, he means volcanic eruptions that occur in the middle of a tectonic plate, far from plate boundaries.
Why does the professor describe moving a sheet of heavy paper over a candle?
The correct answer is C. To illustrate one hypothesis for the way some volcanic anomalies are formed. This hypothesis is the plume hypothesis. The professor first introduced it, then explained what plumes are, and then began to explain how they work. That's when he used the example of paper and a candle.
Why does the professor discuss how high one of the Hawaiian Islands rises above the ocean floor?
D is correct. To emphasize that hotspot volcanoes can produce large amounts of magma. The professor says that's nearly 10 kilometers from the ocean floor to the highest point on the island. And then, he says, so you can imagine the huge amounts of magma or lava that have flowed up to form even just this one island.
According to the crack hypothesis, what causes a hotspot?
D is correct. Hot magma flows up at the point where a tectonic plate has been stretched thin. The professor says that according to the crack hypothesis, hotspots are created when a piece of the crust gets stretched thinner and thinner. As a result, small cracks open up in the crust, and it's through these cracks that magma pushes up to form volcanoes.
What is the professor's opinion of the two main hypotheses he presents?
The correct answer is B. Each hypothesis accounts for some, but not all volcanic anomalies. The professor says that the plume hypothesis is attractive, but even its supporters are uncomfortable claiming that it explains every volcanic anomaly. He later says that the correct hypothesis is also attractive, but it doesn't explain the Hawaiian Islands. This means that neither theory explains all volcanic anomalies. This lecture and the following questions were quite challenging, right? But even so, it's possible to answer each question correctly, if you know how to take notes effectively. In fact, note-taking is one of the most important skills you need to develop in order to do well on the TOEFL listening section. But it's not easy. Some students don't take enough notes and miss key points that could have helped them answer the questions, while others try to write everything down and lose track of the main idea. If you want to master note-taking once and for all, join our TOEFL course. We'll not only do practice tests together, but we'll also break down lecture and conversation scripts to see what's worth writing down and what's not. I'll share essential strategies for the listening section that'll make answering questions much easier, and we'll cover important words, such as campus vocabulary, that you'll undoubtedly need in the listening, speaking, and even writing sections. If you're having trouble getting the score you need on the listening section or on the TOEFL overall, just click on the link below to sign up. Now, here is some essential vocabulary from the lecture that you may encounter on all TOEFL sections. The crust. The crust is the surface of the Earth. Tectonic plates. Tectonic plates are parts of the Earth's surface. Boundaries, edges. Boundaries or edges are the lines that mark the limit of something. Molten rock. Molten rock is hot liquid rock. There are two types of molten rock, magma and lava. Magma is hot liquid rock that is below the surface, and lava is hot liquid rock that is on the surface. Plumes. Plumes are columns of very hot magma. A dormant volcano. This is a volcano that isn't active right now. Think of it as sleeping. An extinct volcano, on the other hand, is one that is no longer active. Think of it as dead. I'm planning to make a separate video on this topic because, as you can see, there are just so many words to cover. So if you're interested, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss it when it comes out. Let's move on to the next section.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor.
Hi, Professor. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about the class you're teaching next semester, the course on Polish drama. I was thinking of taking it.
Well, that's an upper division course. You don't look familiar to me. Are you a student in this department?
No, actually I'm not.
Okay. Have you had other classes in the Slavic languages department here or somewhere else?
No, that's the thing. I was just wondering how good my Polish would have to be, whether the class is taught in Polish or not.
Well, you'd have to have some knowledge of it. By that level, a lot of the students are quite fluent. Plus, there are some native speakers in the department. And we don't plan for it to happen, but it's pretty common for the discussions to kind of move in and out of English and Polish, and it can be difficult to follow. So, how well do you speak Polish?
Not so great. It's just that my father's from there, so I'm interested in learning about, Polish history, Polish culture. Plus, I'm studying drama. I'll probably major in it. I love plays, so I thought your course might be perfect.
To be honest with you, you have to realize that we'll be watching videos of performances and maybe, if we can swing it, even watch a live performance, and those won't necessarily be in translation. Also, texts are sometimes available in translation, but even then some references will be to the original. I'd hope you'd be fairly confident in reading.
To be honest, it sounds totally over my head.
You know what? I believe they'll be offering a survey course on Polish literature. Let me check here. Yes, I thought it was being offered this time. Professor Jaworski's teaching it. Let's see, it covers the major works, epic romantic poetry, the novels, And it does cover one or two plays.
And this is in English?
Yes, you'll be reading mostly English translations, and the discussions will be in English.
Novels and poetry.
They'll provide you with a great historical context for the plays, so when you do get to them, you're going to really have a feel for the times they lived in, so to speak. Plus, this course might also give you the impetus to learn more Polish. Get it to the level where you'd be ready for the other class.
What are the speakers mainly discussing?
B is correct. Whether the student should take an advanced course in Polish drama. This conversation was relatively easy, so I'll just give you the correct answers here.
According to the professor, what will students do in her class?
The correct answers are C and D. Use the Polish language in class discussions and watch recorded performances of Polish plays.
Why is the student interested in the professor's class?
The correct answers are A and D. He wants to learn about his family background, and the course is related to the student's intended course of study.
What does the professor think the student should do?
D is correct. Take a survey course in Polish literature before taking a Polish drama course.
What does the professor imply when she says this?
I'd hope you'd be fairly confident in reading.
C is correct. She is concerned that the student may not be able to read Polish. Vocabulary time. As I mentioned, this conversation was easy, so we only have 2 words worth noting. Over my head. Over my head means too hard for me to understand. Impetus. Impetus is a force that encourages a particular action. For example, plus, this course might also give you the impetus to learn more Polish. Time for the next lecture.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
Okay, today I'd like to spend some time going into more detail about symbiosis. Symbiosis, what is it? Anyone?
I thought it's when 2 organisms are in a relationship that they both benefit from. Well, at least that's what I thought it was until I did the reading last night. Now I'm kind of confused about it because the book used that definition to describe mutualism. Could you explain the difference?
Good. I was hoping that someone would bring that up. Sometimes scientists working in different fields use the term symbiosis to mean slightly different things, and it can get confusing. For example, when symbiosis is used as a synonym for mutualism. But there are quite a few of us out there who think there should be a clearer distinction made between the two. Okay, where to begin? The original definition of symbiosis is pretty simple. It simply means living together. So any close relationship between two organisms of different species would be considered a symbiotic relationship, including positive and negative relationships. Mutualism, then, is a kind of symbiosis, a specific type of symbiotic relationship where both organisms benefit somehow. So your book is correct. Now, I want to make it clear that the positive result from being in a mutualistic relationship doesn't have to be equal for both organisms. It's not a one-to-one ratio here. Is everyone with me so far? Symbiosis, general term. Mutualism, a narrower, more specific kind of symbiosis. Okay. Now, let's take a closer look at mutualistic relationships. I'll start off by describing a case of mutualism that involves a certain butterfly species found in South Africa and Australia. It's a good example of how dependence on a mutualistic relationship can vary. Okay, there's this butterfly family, and I'll spare you the fancy Latin name because it's not important for our purposes here. I'll call them coppers and blues. Well, because most members of this family have blue or copper-colored wings. I think this is one of the most interesting cases of mutualism. These butterflies require the presence of ants to complete their life cycle. Their interaction with ants is obligatory. So this is what happens. A female butterfly of these coppers and blues will lay eggs only on vegetation where there are ants of a particular species. The butterflies can smell, ants leave behind pheromones, a special chemical signal. The butterfly recognizes the ant's pheromones on the plant. And then the newly hatched butterflies, the caterpillars, will feed on this plant after they hatch from the eggs. As the caterpillar gets a little older and finds shelter under nearby rocks or stones to protect itself from predators, it's always attended or escorted by ants. And it always makes its way back to the host plant to feed, guided by the ants, the ant escort service, so to speak. Now, why would the ants go through all this trouble? What's their benefit? Mary?
It's probably related to food.
You're onto something.
Okay, ants feed on sweet stuff, right? So the caterpillar must have some kind of special access to honey or sugars or something like that. Maybe caterpillars produce honey somehow. On second thought, I'm probably way off.
You're pretty close, actually. The caterpillars have a honey gland, an organ that secretes an amino acid and carbohydrate liquid. The caterpillar secretes the liquid from the honey gland, rather large quantities, enough to feed several ants. But what makes this relationship obligatory for the caterpillar? Well, if the ants don't feed regularly on the liquid from the caterpillar's honey gland, the gland overloads and gets infected. The infection will kill the caterpillar, and it'll never reach its final stage of development, becoming a butterfly. John?
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm following here. The caterpillar needs the ants, or it won't make it to the stage where it can become a butterfly. And the ants do this because they get an easy meal out of it, right? But the ants don't absolutely need the caterpillar for survival because they can get food from other places, right? So it's still called mutualism, even though it seems like the caterpillar's getting way more out of it. Oh, wait, you said they don't have to equally benefit. Never mind, sorry.
Yes, but there is a type of mutualism where the relationship is necessary for both organisms to survive. It's called obligatory mutualism, and we'll talk about that in the next class.
What is the professor mainly discussing?
The correct answer is B, a specific kind of symbiotic relationship between organisms. The professor said that mutualism is a type of symbiosis. More precisely, it's a specific type of symbiotic relationship in which both organisms benefit in some way. Then the professor said, "Now, let's take a closer look at mutualistic relationships." This means that in this lecture, the professor is going to discuss mutualistic relationships, which are specific kinds of symbiotic relationships between organisms. That's why answer B is correct.
What does the professor imply about the term symbiosis?
A is correct. It's often used with too narrow a meaning. The professor said that some scientists use the term symbiosis as a synonym for mutualism. But the term symbiosis is more general. It simply means living together. Mutualism, on the other hand, is a narrow term. It means living together and getting some benefit from it. Because scientists sometimes use the term symbiosis instead of mutualism, it's being used with too narrow a meaning, so answer A is correct.
How do the butterflies mentioned by the professor facilitate the relationship between caterpillars and ants of a certain species?
C is correct. The butterflies lay their eggs on plants where the ants are present. The professor said, a female butterfly of these coppers and blues will only lay eggs on vegetation, where there are ants of a particular species.
In the example the professor mentions, how do the ants benefit from their interaction with the caterpillars?
The correct answer is D. The caterpillars produce a liquid from a species gland to feed the ants. The professor mentioned that the caterpillars have honey glands. They secrete the liquid from these glands, and this liquid is enough to feed the ants.
What aspect of mutualism does the professor illustrate with the example of the caterpillars and the ants?
The correct answer is B. It's not necessary for both organisms to benefit equally from the relationship. Answer B is correct, because the caterpillars need the ants to survive, but the ants do not. They can get food from other places, so the caterpillars and the ants do not benefit equally.
What can be inferred about the student when she says this?
Maybe caterpillars produce honey somehow. On second thought, I'm probably way off.
D is correct. She doubts that her statement is correct. The student said, on second thought, I'm probably way off, which means I'm probably completely wrong. Let's review key vocabulary from this lecture. Caterpillars. Caterpillars are little animals that look like this. Way off. Way off means to be completely wrong or mistaken. I'm way off means I'm very wrong or far from being right. To hatch. To hatch means for a baby animal to come out of an egg. Newly hatched butterflies are butterflies that have just come out of their cocoons. To escort. To escort someone means to go with them to make sure they're safe. To secrete. To secrete means to produce liquid. A gland. A gland is an organ that secretes or produces liquid chemicals. Now, let's listen to the next lecture.
Listen to part of a lecture in an American history class.
We've been talking about the transformation, the industrialization of the United States economy in the 19th century. As the country shifted from an agricultural to an industrial base, political power shifted too. Businesses became a lot of power went from the government into the hands of business leaders. So, why did this happen? How did an elite group, a few business giants, how did they end up dominating, controlling a number of important national industries in the last quarter of the 19th century? How did they get to be so dominant? How did they figure out? How did they take advantage of the new industrialization of American society? Well, consider the example of Andrew Carnegie and the steel industry. We've already discussed the development of a national network, a national system of railroads. Well, this growth created a tremendous demand for steel. A national railroad system needs a lot of railroad tracks, right? And Carnegie seized the opportunity. He built the world's most modern steel mill, and he came up with a system of business organization called vertical integration. Vertical integration just means that every single activity of a particular industry's processing is performed by a single company. In the case of the steel industry, this means the mining of iron ore, the transportation used to get ore from the mine to the mill, turning the ore into the steel, the manufacturing process, and sales. Carnegie controlled all of these. He practiced vertical integration on such a large scale that he practically owned the whole steel industry. This, of course, gave him a lot of political clout. Just a quick sketch, but you get the idea, right? Here's another example. John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller owned an oil refinery, but he wanted to expand his business. Since there was lots of competition in the industry, he thought the smart way to go about it would be to buy his competitors' businesses. But at the time, it was illegal for one corporation to control another. So what he did was, he created an organizational structure called a trust. A trust is, I don't have to go into that now. What matters is that a trust created a single, central management team, and that team directed the activities of what otherwise still appeared to be independent companies. This new, legal entity worked so well that at one point Rockefeller controlled 90% of the country's oil refineries, which again gave him lots of political power. So you've got two different approaches to expanding a business, and both were quite effective. Of course, these weren't the only two examples. A number of big businesses run by powerful individuals developed across, a wide range of industries, like railroads, food processing, electricity. But what they all had in common was the government let them operate pretty much how they wanted to. So why did they do that? Why did the government keep such a low profile and allow individuals to gain so much control of the industries? Well, obviously, they had the wealth and the power to influence political leaders. But also, the truth is that these industry leaders made a significant contribution. Their investments in technologies led to the development of many new production techniques, which strengthened the economy, and many of them gave lots of money to charity. Andrew Carnegie was particularly admired for his generosity. But there was one thing in particular that gave them power, and that's they were beneficiaries, probably the biggest beneficiaries of a theory, a dominant political theory in the 19th century, something called laissez-faire doctrine. Laissez-faire roughly means let it alone, and that pretty much summarized the theory's philosophy. The idea was that government should leave business alone, allow it to operate unregulated. Legislatures weren't supposed to pass a lot of laws or worry about regulating business practices. When people did challenge a company's business conduct, I mean in court cases, well, the few laws that did exist were usually interpreted in favor of business interests. But over time, it started becoming increasingly obvious and troubling to the public that some of these big companies simply had too much control. There were criticisms that owners had too much opportunity to exploit workers and consumers, because they could control prices and wages. And small business owners and small farmers couldn't compete. So there was bad press, bad publicity. Enough that the government eventually felt it had to do something. So it passed two key pieces of legislation. One law was designed to regulate the prices set by the railroads. Another made it illegal for trusts to be used to limit competition. Both were aimed squarely at reducing the exclusive control that existed in some industries.
What is the lecture mainly about?
C is correct. Reasons that business leaders gained political power in the late 19th century United States. The professor said, a lot of power went from the government into the hands of business leaders. And then asked, why did this happen? So it's clear that C is the correct answer.
Why does the professor discuss vertical integration?
The correct answer is A. To explain how Andrew Carnegie gained control of the steel industry. The professor mentioned Andrew Carnegie and the steel industry. He said that when the demand for steel increased, Carnegie built the most modern steel mill and came up with the idea of vertical integration, which allowed him to perform all the activities of the steel industry, and as a result, practically own the entire industry.
In what two ways did business leaders make a positive contribution to the United States in the 19th century?
The correct answers are A and D. They invested in new production technologies, and they supported charitable causes. In the lecture, the professor said that industry leaders made a significant contribution. Their investments in technologies led to the development of many new production techniques. And many of them gave lots of money to charity.
According to the professor, what is the main reason that some businesses were able to become powerful during the 19th century?
C is correct. The government did not impose many regulations on businesses. The professor said that one thing in particular that gave businesses power was the idea that the government should leave business alone and allow it to operate unregulated. As a result, legislators weren't supposed to pass a lot of laws or worry about regulating business practices.
Why did the government pass new laws aimed at businesses?
B is correct. To respond to complaints from the public. In the lecture, the professor said, but over time, it started becoming increasingly obvious and troubling to the public that some of these big companies simply had too much control. There were criticisms that owners had too much opportunity to exploit workers and consumers because they could control prices and wages. So there was bad press, bad publicity, enough that the government eventually felt it had to do something.
Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question.
A trust is, I don't have to go into that now. What matters is that a trust created a single, central management team, and that team directed the activities of what otherwise still appeared to be independent companies.
What does the professor imply about the term trust?
The correct answer is B. It's unnecessary to explain the details of the term. The professor said, a trust is? Well, I don't have to go into that now. So it's clear she didn't think she needed to explain what a trust is at that point in the lecture. The most important words from this lecture are to shift. To shift means to move. To seize the opportunity. To seize the opportunity is to use the opportunity. Iron ore. Iron ore is rock from which iron can be extracted. A mine. A mine is a pit in the earth from which minerals are extracted. A steel mill. A steel mill is a factory where steel is made. An oil refinery. An oil refinery is a factory that turns crude oil into usable petroleum products, such as diesel fuel, gasoline, and more. A beneficiary. A beneficiary is a person who receives money or benefits as a result of something else. A beneficiary of a theory is the person who benefits from that theory. A legislator. A legislator is someone who is responsible for making laws.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a financial aid advisor at a university.
Hi, Ms. Ramirez. Thanks for seeing me. I'm having a bit of trouble managing my finances.
Of course, Liam. That's what I'm here for. What seems to be the biggest challenge?
Well, it's everything, really. Tuition, books, living expenses. It's all adding up faster than I expected. I feel like I'm constantly running out of money.
I understand. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it, right? Let's see if we can patch that hole. First, have you created a budget?
A budget? Not really. I kind of just, spend what I need and hope there's enough left over.
Okay, that's a common starting point, but it's not very sustainable. A budget is like a roadmap for your money. It helps you see where it's going and make sure you're prioritizing the important things.
So, how do I even start?
The first step is to track your expenses. For 1 month, write down everything you spend money on, even that small coffee or snack. Every penny counts.
Everything? That sounds tedious.
It might seem that way at first, but it's incredibly eye-opening. You'll be surprised where your money actually goes. There are also apps that can help you with this, like Mint or YNAB.
Apps, huh? Okay, I can do that. What's next?
Once you know where your money is going, you can categorize your expenses. Separate them into needs, like tuition, rent, and groceries, and wants, like eating out, entertainment, and new clothes.
Needs and wants? I guess that makes sense.
Exactly. Then you can start making choices. Can you reduce any of your wants? Maybe eat out less often or find cheaper entertainment options. Small changes can make a big difference.
I could probably cut back on eating out and maybe look for used textbooks instead of buying new ones.
Excellent. Those are great ideas. Used textbooks can save you a significant amount of money. Also, check out the university's resources. We have a food pantry for students, and there are often free events on campus.
A food pantry? I didn't know that.
Yes, it's available to all students. And we also offer workshops on financial literacy topics like budgeting, saving, and managing student loans.
Wow, that sounds really helpful. When are those workshops?
They're usually held once a month. I can give you a schedule, or you can find it on the financial aid website.
I'll definitely check that out. This is already making me feel a little less stressed.
Good. Remember, it's a process. It takes time to develop good financial habits. Don't get discouraged if you slip up occasionally. Just keep learning and adjusting.
Thanks, Ms. Ramirez. I really appreciate your help. I feel like I have a much better plan now.
You're very welcome, Liam. And don't hesitate to come back if you have more questions. My door is always open.
Question 1. What are the speakers mainly discussing? The correct answer is B. Strategies for managing personal finances and creating a budget. Liam is having trouble managing his finances, and the financial aid advisor gives him tips on how to handle that. She tells him he needs to create a budget and explains how to do it. Question 2. Which budgeting apps does Ms. Ramirez mention as helpful tools for tracking expenses? The correct answer is A. Mint and YNAB. Ms. Ramirez suggests that Liam write down all of his expenses for a month. When he complains about how hard or tedious, meaning boring, it sounds, she says there are 2 apps that can help him track his expenses. Question 3. According to Ms. Ramirez, what is the first step in creating a budget? The first step in creating a budget is tracking every expense for 1 month. So answer B is the correct one. Question 4. What does Ms. Ramirez mean when she says, it's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it? The correct answer is B. The constant outflow of money despite saving efforts. When Liam complains that tuition, books, living expenses, and other costs are all adding up too fast, and that it makes him feel like he's constantly running out of money? Ms. Ramirez says that she understands and replies, "It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it." She means that Liam's money is disappearing just like water leaking from a bucket with a hole. There is a constant outflow of money. Outflow usually refers to a large amount of money spent by a company. But in this case, it describes how money is leaving Liam despite his efforts to save. Question 5. According to the conversation, what are 2 resources the university offers to help students with their finances? Just 2 answers. Well, students can use a food pantry, answer A, and financial literacy workshops, answer B. Ms. Ramirez mentioned both of these resources. In case you're wondering, a food pantry looks like this. It's a place where students can get food for free. And workshops might look like this. Workshops are short interactive lessons or training sessions often held in small groups. Financial literacy is the ability to understand and use financial skills, such as budgeting or saving, which is exactly what Liam needs. One of the most important things to remember about the TOEFL, it's not just about your English proficiency. If you want to get to your target score fast and from the first attempt, you need to understand the rules, patterns, and hidden traps of the TOEFL. For example, did you know that answer choices with absolute words, such as only or completely, are often incorrect in the reading section? Do you know the strategy that will help you solve insert text questions in just a few minutes? Have you learned the speaking and writing templates that allow you to answer quickly and score high? I've seen students with excellent English skills receive average scores, and others score high even though their English wasn't perfect. That's why we created our TOEFL course, to provide you with all the tips, tricks, and strategies you need to master the test and reach your target score in the shortest time possible. You'll get access to 32 recorded practice sessions that cover each part of the test, a group Telegram chat where you can ask me questions about the course material and interact with your TOEFL classmates, high-scoring speaking and writing templates, and a consultation with me where I will evaluate your essays and speaking skills. You'll also receive access to the LinguaTOEFL platform where you can apply all the skills you've learned in the course by practicing all 4 sections. Drill reading question types until you master each one. Record your speaking responses and get them scored right on the platform. Get your essays evaluated by AI. I'm leaving the link in the description below. Click on it and start working toward your dream score now. Let's move on to the next part where you listen to a lecture.
Listen to part of a lecture in a modern history class examining the Cold War. The professor has been discussing the concept of proxy wars.
All right, so we've been talking about proxy wars and how they were a defining feature of the Cold War. Essentially, you have these 2 superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union, who are ideologically opposed capitalism versus communism, but they're avoiding direct, large-scale military conflict. Why? Because of the threat of nuclear war, mutually assured destruction, or MAD, as it was, somewhat darkly, nicknamed. So instead of fighting each other directly, they supported opposing sides in smaller conflicts around the globe. Think of it like 2 chess players who, instead of moving their own pieces, are controlling other, smaller chess sets on different boards. Now, a key concept that often gets overlooked when we discuss these proxy wars is the idea of plausible deniability. This was crucial for both the US and the USSR. Plausible deniability means that a government can credibly deny any involvement in a particular action, even if they were secretly behind it. It's about creating a level of separation, a buffer, so they can avoid direct blame and the potential for escalation. It's a way of saying, we didn't do it, even if everyone kind of suspects you did. Let's look at a couple of examples. Take the Korean War. The US supported South Korea, providing troops, supplies, and air support. The Soviet Union, on the other hand, supported North Korea.
They provided weapons, advisors, and crucially, pilots for the North Korean Air Force. But the Soviet pilots flew planes with North Korean markings, and they were officially volunteers. This allowed the Soviets to claim they weren't directly involved in the fighting, even though they were playing a pivotal role. It kept the conflict limited, at least in theory. Another example, and a somewhat more complex one, is the Soviet-Afghan War. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979 to support the communist government there. The U.S. in turn saw this as a Soviet expansionist move and a threat to their interests in the region. So what did the U.S. do? They provided covert support to the Mujahideen, the Afghan resistance fighters. This support included weapons, training, and funding, often channeled through third-party countries like Pakistan. Again, plausible deniability was key. The U.S. could argue they were simply supporting a legitimate resistance movement against a foreign invader, even though their real goal was to bog down the Soviets in a costly and unwinnable war. A student once asked, did it really work? Well, it did, to an extent, help. The goal, remember, wasn't to hide their involvement completely. That was often impossible. But to maintain a level of ambiguity that would prevent a direct confrontation with the other superpower. It was a dangerous game, a high-stakes balancing act, and it's something we see echoed to varying degrees in international relations even today. Plausible deniability. It's a way of operating in the shadows, of influencing events without taking full responsibility. It's a concept worth understanding, not just in the context of the Cold War, but in understanding how power operates on the global stage.
Question 1. What is the main topic of the lecture? It's the role of plausible deniability in Cold War proxy conflicts. Answer B. Plausible deniability is when someone pretends they don't know about something, so later they can say they weren't involved. By the way, proxy wars are conflicts where two powerful countries or groups don't fight each other directly. Instead, they support other countries or groups who do the fighting for them. Question 2. According to the professor, why did the superpowers engage in proxy wars instead of direct conflict? Well, the correct answer is B. They feared the devastating consequences of a nuclear exchange. In the lecture, the professor explained that both the US and the USSR engaged in proxy wars because of the threat of nuclear war and the idea of mutually assured destruction. Mutually means in a way that involves both sides. For example, if an agreement is mutually beneficial, it means that it benefits both parties. Question 3. In the context of the Korean War, what example of plausible deniability does the professor provide? Answer B is correct. The Soviet Union using volunteer pilots in North Korean aircraft. The Soviet Union supported North Korea by providing weapons, advisors, and pilots. However, the Soviet pilots flew planes marked as North Korean, making it harder to accuse the Soviet Union of direct involvement. They were also officially labeled as volunteers, so if anyone questioned their presence, the Soviet Union could claim they were acting on their own. Question 4. What was the primary US objective in providing support to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, according to the professor? Their primary objective was to create a situation where the Soviet Union became trapped in a draining conflict. The professor explained that the US provided resistance fighters with weapons, training, and funding, often through third-party countries like Pakistan. Plausible deniability was key again. The US could always argue that it was simply supporting a legitimate resistance movement against a foreign invader, even though the real goal was to bog down the Soviets in a costly and unwinnable war. To bog someone down means to make them stuck, usually in a difficult or time-consuming situation. Question 5. What does the professor suggest about the effectiveness of plausible deniability? She suggests that it created a degree of uncertainty that helped avoid direct superpower conflict. Answer C. In the lecture, the professor said that plausible deniability did help, to some extent. The goal wasn't to completely hide a country's involvement, that was often impossible, but rather to maintain a level of ambiguity that would prevent direct confrontation with the other superpower. So yes, it did help avoid direct conflict between them. Let's move on to the final question. Question 6.
Now listen again to part of the lecture.
It's about creating a level of separation, a buffer, so they can avoid direct blame and the potential for escalation. It's a way of saying, we didn't do it, even if everyone kind of suspects you did.
Why does the professor say this? It's a way of saying, we didn't do it, even if everyone kind of suspects you did. The correct answer is B. To give a simplistic, relatable definition of a complex political concept. The professor is explaining the term plausible deniability. Since it's a complex idea, she tries to make it easier to understand by putting it in simpler terms. Let's move on to the next section.
Listen to a conversation between a student and the chair of the history department at a university.
Good morning, Dr. Evans. Thanks for seeing me.
Of course, Liam. Please have a seat. What's on your mind?
Well, it's about Professor Miller's History 101 class. I'm, a little concerned about his teaching style.
I see. Can you be more specific? What aspects are causing you concern?
It's mainly the lectures. He tends to go off on tangents, and it's hard to follow the main points. We spend a lot of time on, really obscure details, and I'm worried it's affecting my understanding of the core material.
I understand. So the lectures feel disorganized and lack focus on the essential concepts?
Exactly. And it's not just me. I've talked to other students, and a few of them feel the same way. We're all a bit lost.
I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Liam. It takes courage to voice these concerns. Have you tried speaking with Professor Miller directly?
I haven't. I was a bit nervous about it, to be honest. He's a very respected scholar, and I didn't want to offend him.
That's understandable. Sometimes those conversations can be difficult. Perhaps I could offer some suggestions. You could frame it as seeking clarification, rather than criticism. For example, you could ask him during office hours to summarize the key takeaways from a particular lecture.
That's a good idea. I could also ask for, a list of the main topics we should be focusing on for the exams.
Precisely. That shows you're engaged and proactive, not just complaining. It also gives him valuable feedback in a non-threatening way.
That makes sense. I'm just worried that, if I don't grasp the fundamentals now, it'll be harder to succeed in upper-level history courses.
That's a valid concern. A strong foundation is crucial. Now, if speaking with him directly doesn't improve things, there are other avenues. The university has a student feedback system, and we take those evaluations very seriously.
Okay, good to know. Is that anonymous?
Yes, completely. And the feedback is only reviewed after grades are submitted, so there's no risk of any, shall we say, unintended consequences.
Right, that's reassuring.
We also have peer tutoring available through the history department. Perhaps working with a senior student could help you solidify your understanding of the material.
That's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that.
And of course, my door is always open. If you continue to have concerns, please don't hesitate to come back and see me.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. I really appreciate your advice and support. I feel much better about how to approach this now.
You're very welcome, Liam. I'm confident we can find a solution that works for everyone. Remember, effective communication is key, both in history and in life.
Question 1. What are the speakers mainly discussing? Liam's concerns about Professor Miller's teaching style and potential solutions. Answer B. This conversation was relatively easy, so I'll just give you the correct answers here. If you need an explanation, don't worry. You'll see it on the screen right after the correct answer. Question 2. According to the transcript, why is Liam hesitant to approach Professor Miller directly about his teaching style? The correct answer is B. He fears a confrontation with a professor known for his stellar reputation. Question 3. According to Dr. Evans, when is the student feedback reviewed? The student feedback is reviewed once all final grades are finalized. Answer C. Question 4. What does Dr. Evans mean when she says, there is no risk of any, shall we say, unintended consequences? The correct answer is D. That providing feedback will have no negative impact on his grade. Question 5. What are 2 resources or strategies Dr. Evans suggests to Liam? Choose 2 answers. B. Utilizing the university's anonymous student feedback system. And C. Accessing the history department's peer tutoring program. Well done! Now here is some essential vocabulary from this conversation that you may encounter across all TOEFL sections. Stellar. Stellar means excellent or outstanding, like stars in the sky. So a stellar reputation means that someone is very respected, trusted, and known for being very good at what they do. This word can also appear in texts or lectures on astronomy. If you struggle with that topic, check out my vocabulary video where I explain difficult astronomy terms and processes using simple language, bright pictures, and colorful clips. Unintended consequences. These are results you didn't plan or expect, usually negative or surprising. It's when you do something, but then something else happens that you didn't mean to happen. For example, the government bans plastic bags, but this leads to more paper waste. That's an unintended consequence. To utilize means to use, often in an effective or practical way. Now, in this part, we also came across 2 terms that are important when studying in the US: the university's anonymous student feedback system and the peer tutoring program. You might encounter these terms in the future, so it's a good idea to know what they mean. In many American universities, students are encouraged to take an active role in improving their education. For example, most schools have an anonymous student feedback system where you can share your honest thoughts about professors and courses without giving your name. These comments are taken seriously and are often used to make changes or improve teaching quality. The peer tutoring program is another common feature. This means that students who are strong in a certain subject volunteer or get hired to help others who need extra support. It's a great way to get help from someone who understands what you're going through, and it's usually free. Time for the next lecture.
Listen to part of a lecture in a hydrology class. The professor has been discussing different sources of fresh water.
Okay, so last time we talked about surface water, rivers, lakes, that sort of thing. Today, I want to move on to groundwater, which, is a crucial part of the water cycle and a really important resource for us. Now think about it, where does rain go after it falls on the ground? Some of it runs off into those rivers and lakes we discussed, sure. Some of it is taken up by plants, and some evaporates back into the atmosphere. But a good portion of it infiltrates, that's the key word here, infiltrates down into the ground. This water, this groundwater, fills up the spaces, the pores and cracks in soil and rock. Imagine a sponge, right? You pour water on it, and it soaks it up. The ground is like a giant natural sponge. We call these underground layers of water-bearing rock or sediment aquifers. Aquifers are essentially underground reservoirs, and these aquifers can be huge. They can stretch for miles and miles, holding vast quantities of fresh water. Now, the top of this saturated zone, the zone where all the spaces are filled with water, is called the water table. The water table isn't a flat, static thing. It rises and falls depending on a few factors. For instance, during a prolonged drought, the water table will drop because there's less infiltration from rainfall. Conversely, after heavy rains, the water table will rise. The depth of the water table can vary dramatically too. In some places, it might be just a few feet below the surface. In others, It could be hundreds of feet down. So how do we use groundwater? Well, primarily through wells. We drill wells down into these aquifers and pump the water out. This water is used for all sorts of things: drinking water, irrigation for agriculture, industrial processes, you name it. In many parts of the world, groundwater is the main source of fresh water, particularly in arid and semi-arid regions where surface water is scarce. Does anyone know of a major heavily used aquifer in the United States? Yes, Sarah?
I think the Ogallala Aquifer. It's under the Great Plains, right?
Exactly. The Ogallala Aquifer is a classic example. It underlies parts of 8 states, from South Dakota down to Texas, and it's a huge source of water for agriculture in that region. Unfortunately, it's also a prime example of a problem we face with groundwater: over-extraction. We're pumping water out of the Ogallala and many other aquifers around the world much faster than it's being replenished naturally through infiltration. Think of it like constantly withdrawing money from your bank account without making any deposits. Eventually, you're going to run out. This over-extraction has some serious consequences. First, it can lead to land subsidence. That's when the ground actually sinks because the water that was supporting the soil and rock layers is gone. We see this in places like California's Central Valley, another major agricultural area heavily reliant on groundwater. Second, in coastal areas, overpumping can cause saltwater intrusion. Basically, the fresh water in the aquifer acts as a barrier, keeping the salt water from the ocean from moving inland. But when you remove too much fresh water, that barrier weakens, and salt water can seep into the aquifer, contaminating the freshwater supply. This is a big problem in many coastal communities. Well, are there any questions?
Question 1. What is the primary topic of the lecture? The correct answer is C. Underground water sources and their importance. At the beginning of the lecture, the professor says that today she wants to move on to groundwater, which is a crucial part of the water cycle and a really important resource for people. Then, she explains what groundwater is and discusses aquifers, excessive groundwater extraction and its consequences. Question 2. According to the professor, what is an aquifer? An underground layer of rock or sediment that holds water. Answer C. The professor says that groundwater infiltrates into the ground and fills the spaces and cracks in soil and rock. This is similar to how a sponge soaks up water. These underground layers of water-bearing rock or sediment are called aquifers. That's why C is the correct answer. Question 3. What determines the level of the water table? C. The amount of rainfall and rate of infiltration. To answer this question, you need to understand what a water table is. It's the top of the saturated zone, the zone where all the spaces are filled with water. It's not flat or static. It rises and falls depending on a few factors. During a prolonged drought, the water table drops because there is less infiltration from rainfall. Conversely, after heavy rains, the water table rises. That's why rainfall and the rate of infiltration determine the level of the water table. Question 4. What example of an aquifer does the professor mention, and what issue is associated with it? The correct answer is C. The Ogallala Aquifer, over-extraction. The professor explains that we access groundwater through wells, which are drilled into aquifers to pump water out. In many parts of the world, groundwater is the main source of fresh water, especially in arid or semi-arid regions where surface water is scarce. She then asks students if they know a major heavily used aquifer in the US, and one of them names the Ogallala Aquifer. The professor confirms that it's a classic example of an aquifer and a major source of water for agriculture in its region. Unfortunately, it's also a prime example of over-extraction. Question 5. What are two consequences of excessive groundwater extraction? The professor explains. Choose two answers. The consequences are B, the sinking of the ground surface, and C, contamination of fresh water with seawater. According to the professor, excessive extraction means we're pumping water out of aquifers much faster than it's being naturally replenished through infiltration. This leads to land subsidence. She explains land subsidence as when the ground sinks, because the water that was supporting the soil and rock layers is gone. Then she mentions a second consequence. In coastal areas, overpumping can cause saltwater intrusion. Normally, the fresh water in the aquifer acts as a barrier that keeps ocean saltwater from moving inland. But when too much fresh water is removed, that barrier weakens and saltwater can seep into the aquifer, contaminating the freshwater supply. Question 6.
Now listen again to part of the lecture.
Basically, the fresh water in the aquifer acts as a barrier, keeping the salt water from the ocean from moving inland. But when you remove too much fresh water, that barrier weakens, and salt water can seep into the aquifer, contaminating the freshwater supply. This is a big problem in many coastal communities. Well, are there any questions?
Why does the professor say this? Well, are there any questions? D, to check for understanding and invite inquiries. This one is easy. The professor is simply trying to see if the students understand what she said and is encouraging them to ask questions if they have any. Now let's go over some of the words from the lecture that I often see in the listening section and other parts of the TOEFL. Sediment. These are small pieces of rock or sand that settle at the bottom of water. Soil. Soil is the top layer of earth where plants grow. Well. A well is a deep hole dug to reach water underground. Arid. This means very dry. Arid regions are areas with little or no rainfall, so they're extremely dry. Semi-arid. This means somewhat dry. These areas get more rain than arid regions, but still not very much. Scarce. Scarce means not enough or hard to find. When food is scarce, it means it's difficult to find. In arid regions, water is scarce, meaning there isn't enough of it. Prime is easy. It means main or most important. A prime example means the most important or typical example. Extraction. Extraction is the act of taking something out, such as water, oil, or minerals. To replenish, it means to fill up again or to replace what was lost. To sink. To sink is to go down or drop lower, usually into water or the ground. When land sinks, it means the ground level goes down. Intrusion. Intrusion is unwanted entry into a place. Saltwater intrusion is when saltwater moves into freshwater areas, like aquifers. To seep. To seep is to leak slowly or flow through something gradually, like water through soil. Finally, to contaminate means to make something dirty or unsafe, usually by adding harmful substances. It's similar in meaning to pollute. These words are really common in reading passages and lectures, so make sure to write them down. If you want to study English in Dubai, English Path is the perfect choice. It's the only school in the UAE accredited by the British Council and is located right in the heart of Knowledge Park, the city's student hub. You'll enjoy spacious classrooms, a library, a lounge area, and a diverse community of students from 50 different countries. All teachers are native speakers from the UK and the US. The intensive course offers 20+ lessons per week, along with electives in business, finance, conversational English, and more, suitable for all levels. English Path in Dubai is your ticket to a confident future in English. Sign up for a free consultation via the link in the description to learn more. Now let's listen to the next lecture.
Listen to part of a lecture in a primatology class. The professor has been discussing primate communication.
All right, class, so we have been talking about primate communication and how it is not just about vocalizations, right? We have looked at gestures, facial expressions. Today, I want to focus on a fascinating aspect of primate social organization, grooming. Now, you might be thinking grooming like picking bugs off each other. Well, yes, partly, but it is so much more than that. In the primate world, grooming is a fundamental social activity. It is a way of building and maintaining relationships. Think of it like humans having coffee with a friend or giving someone a pat on the back. Grooming involves one primate carefully picking through the fur of another, removing dirt, parasites, dead skin, things like that. It is obviously beneficial for hygiene, keeping the animals healthy. But the social function is, in many ways, even more important. The act of grooming strengthens social bonds. It reduces tension and aggression within the group. It is a way of saying, I trust you, I care about you. And it is often reciprocal, you groom me, and I will groom you later. This reciprocity is key to understanding its social role. Let us look at some examples. Chimpanzees, for instance, spend a significant amount of time grooming each other. High-ranking chimps often receive more grooming than they give. This reinforces their status within the group. It is like a subordinate showing deference to a dominant individual. And interestingly, grooming can even be used as a kind of currency. A chimp might groom another in exchange for, say, support in a future conflict or access to food. It is a complex social exchange. Another great example is found in macaque monkeys. Studies have shown that female macaques form strong grooming networks. These networks are not random. They tend to groom relatives more often than non-relatives, and they groom individuals of similar rank more often than those of very different ranks. This creates, well, a kind of social stability. It helps maintain the social hierarchy and reinforces kinship ties. These grooming networks can be quite intricate, and they can influence everything from access to resources to protection from predators. So what are the implications of all this? Well, understanding grooming behavior gives us insights into the complexities of primate social life. It shows us that these animals are not just, randomly interacting. They have structured relationships, and grooming is a crucial tool for navigating those relationships. It is a window into their social intelligence. It helps us understand how they cooperate, how they compete, and how they maintain social cohesion. And frankly, it is a reminder that social bonding is a fundamental need, not just for humans, but for many other primates as well. Any questions? Okay, let us move on to discussing.
Question 1. What is the primary focus of the lecture? The role of grooming in primate social structures. The correct answer is B. At the beginning of the lecture, the professor says, today I want to focus on a fascinating aspect of primate social organization, grooming. By the way, if you didn't know, in animals, especially in primates, grooming often means picking dirt or insects off each other's fur. Question 2. Besides hygiene, what other significant benefit does grooming provide for primates, according to the professor? The correct answer is C. It serves to reinforce social connections and ease group conflict. In the lecture, the professor says that grooming is so much more than picking bugs off each other. It's a fundamental social activity. It's a way of building and maintaining relationships. She explains that grooming strengthens social bonds and reduces tension and aggression within the group. That's why answer C is correct. To reinforce means to make something stronger. To reinforce social connections means to strengthen relationships between people. Question 3. In chimpanzees' communities, what does the professor suggest is indicated when a high-ranking individual receives more grooming? B. an affirmation of their dominant position in the group. The professor says that high-ranking chimps tend to receive more grooming than they give. This reinforces their status within the group. It's like a subordinate showing deference to a dominant individual. Deference means showing respect to someone, especially because they're older or more important. Question 4. According to the professor, what pattern is commonly observed in the grooming networks of female macaque monkeys? They favor grooming family members and those of comparable social standing. Answer C. Studies have shown that female macaques form strong grooming networks, and these networks are not random. They tend to groom relatives more often than non-relatives, and they groom individuals of similar rank more often than those of very different ranks. This helps create a sense of social stability. Question 5. What overall insight does the professor say the study of primate grooming provides? The correct answer is B. It reveals the intricate nature of relationships and social dynamics within primate groups. In the lecture, the professor says that understanding grooming behavior gives us insights into the complexities of primate social life. She adds that it shows these animals are not just randomly interacting. They have structured relationships, and grooming is a crucial tool for navigating those relationships. That's why answer B is correct. Intricate means very detailed and complicated. An intricate design has many small parts or patterns. Primate social life is intricate because it involves many complex relationships. Question 6.
Now listen again to part of the lecture.
And frankly, it is a reminder that social bonding is a fundamental need, not just for humans, but for many other primates as well.
Why does the professor say this? And frankly, it's a reminder that social bonding is a fundamental need. Answer B is correct. To emphasize the broad significance of social connections across species. The professor says that social bonding is a fundamental skill not just for humans, but also for other primates, which means this skill is important across different species. By the way, social bonding is a common term. It means forming close relationships with others through trust, care, and shared experiences. For example, grooming helps monkeys with social bonding. It brings them closer together. As for people, they build social bonds by talking, helping each other, and spending time together. That's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more tips on how to ace the TOEFL exam. Remember, it's not about learning everything. It's about learning the right things. And now you've got a head start. See you next time. Bye.